and thank you for coming. Been talking about this quite a bit, as you all know, the last few weeks, because this is a very timely topic. We hear about human trafficking more and more in the news, and it's something that just destroys so many young people's lives. And the good thing is that we have a number of folks in the community here working to rescue those who are caught up in this, who have been drawn into this, and Mr. Sven Schumacher is one of those, and so he is the president of Lutheran Child and Family Services, which is located on the east side, and we've been doing the German language service with Giles Hoyt for many years now. I should say Sven's been doing most of it because he speaks German, and also you have you're an official in Germany as well, Sven? Yes, as well. Here, yeah, for Germany. Yep, yeah. So let's welcome him. Let's give him a warm welcome. And I will.
Okay, very festive, the Advent service, and we have really a lot of people coming, and some of them are German speakers, but a number of people just like to come because that was probably the language of the services when they were either little or they of their grandparents, and so it has always been a wonderful thing to do this, and it's just kind of interesting to come through that little door up there. You know, maybe the pastors were littler years ago. You know, they squeeze themselves through there. So that's one of the connections that I'm very excited. And so when Pastor Jonathan and I talked about the work that we are doing at Lutheran Child and Family Services, some of you might be a little bit familiar. Because every year when we have our German language services, we talk about the sharing place, and so that's the other area that Lutheran Child and Family Services are on the front line, and that's the fight against hunger. And so all these things are of course related to each other, and so but today we will talk about our work with the kids. So let's go a little bit back into history. So this is of course one of the oldest German language services and churches in our community. And the agency that I work for, Lutheran Child and Family Services, was founded 1883. So it's, it's at least from where I come from, it's about 500 years old. If something, it's about a 500 year. For European ways, it's probably about 500 years at a minimum. You maybe even a little older, but. So in the very beginning, probably people knew of each other. We had a number of Lutheran churches, Missouri Synod, that founded the agency. Now there was probably the history with the Germans is when they had more than 3 of them together, they were at least trying to have 4 different clubs, So they were always very particular on where and what, and so I would not be surprised that maybe in this congregation people knew about what the Lutherans were doing, but probably not in any way involved. Now it is interesting because this church, if I'm not totally mistaken, supported the Pleasant Run Children's Home and were connected with that. Is that about right? The Pleasant Run Children's Home, it's still as a building around on the south side, but our building that the Lutherans built looked very similar. And interestingly, that building was at about Washington and LaSalle Street on the national road. And so that's where it all started, working with kids that are abused and neglected. Now, yeah, I have to say, in those early days, the agency was completely what would you call today a self-help organization. They were not serving anybody that was not Lutheran. And it's really interesting because all of the records of the agency until 1919 were all in this wonderful handwritten German that Louise is for the longest time, trying to read, because many of her old stuff is in that beautiful written language that I cannot figure out. So so I had somebody who was a former professor of German at Marian College. Do you remember her? She transcribed all of that into a typed written German, and then I could read it, and then I could figure out what was going on in those early days of trying to help children in our community. Of course, in those days, Indianapolis was so much smaller. We're talking about maybe 150,000 people. But very quickly, people in our churches saw that there are some issues in the community that needed to be addressed. And not differently from today, it is either the very young ones or the very old ones that need our special concern and prayers and our special work. And so Lutherans started to work with the young ones. But in the early days, when they had that log cabin, they bought a farm. It's kind of really interesting to read all this stuff, I'm glad that the executive director now is paid a little bit more than the old orphan father. In 1890, he was paid $300 a year, but he was allowed to bring his own cow. So I mean, I wanted to go back with you a little bit in this early days of social services, because I know that many people in this church have been interested in their German roots and in how this all came together. Now, when I read all this stuff, I don't believe in the good old days. I don't think the good old days were not really as good as they maybe sound like and look like. And so it is interesting that we dealt with these issues. Now, it was not, they called these places orphanages. And I'm not totally sure what the total definition of an orphanage is, but most of the children that we even had more than 120 years ago at Lutherwood, they still had parents or somebody out there. It was just the issue that for some reason, and that was probably not different at Österlin, where your family has been involved with, that they were probably there because there was some challenge in the family. That there was some challenge in the family, that there was something going on in the family that they couldn't take care of the children. And so that was, I think, for the most part, if you read the stories, because how this is now all totally different. In the olden days, a person like Pastor Jonathan would write to the orphanage and would say, we have somebody in my congregation, and the father just left, or something like story like this, maybe the gold rush or something, were just taken off, and the mom maybe had some, and they didn't use what we call now DSM 5 categories of mental illness, but there was often something that could give you an idea that there was probably somebody that might have what we maybe would call today depression or substance abuse issues or something, and so then the pastor would write to the orphan home and would say, please, we have somebody, and we are willing to pay something for that at the amount of about 25 cents a day for the child to be at the place, These were other days, different days, So anyway, let's move forward. We are across the street from Community East Hospital. Of about, Lutherans were bought there in the 1950s, about 20-some acres. And they built a pretty, in those days, a pretty state-of-the-art little facility. And of course, some of you know that the East Side was the place to be in the early 50s, you know. They had the first mall, I think, in Indiana out there, Eastgate, and there was all this industry and thousands of jobs, Jerry, you know, Western Electric and Chrysler and Ford, and I mean lots and lots of jobs and lots of development, and so it was probably a good place to be. There were new churches built, and so it was and then they built a brand new hospital. The Community Hospital East was built there at about exactly the same time. We have always been very close to Community East Hospital, and for about 2.5 years we have a very close working relationship, basically because the children that we have that come to Lutherwood today have more severe problems than just the type of issues we dealt with in the last more than 100 years. You know, in general, when you think about a social service agency and a children's home, traditionally you were dealing with kids that had maybe what we would call in my language adjustment issues. You know, they had an adjustment issue to the issue that their parents were not taking care of them, that they were maybe without any really parental figures, that there was maybe abuse, but even often worse for children is neglect. You know, it's this kind of, you know, nobody cares about you type of feeling. And so we, for the longest time, were dealing well with that. You know, and what kids in that situation need, they need people that are understanding of their situation. They give them structured success. They have a structured program, because many of the kids at least when I came there 20 years ago to Lutherwood, then we had a lot of kids that were basically neglected, you know, medically and behaviorally. If they didn't want to do something, they just didn't do it because nobody ever made them before, you know, and they were of that kind. Now the thing that changed was in the years that these type of kids, in general, just amazing kids, you know, they were just in the wrong spot, you know, and those kids are probably today not in an institution anymore, and that's very, very good news. You know, those kids are not in an institution anymore. They are in foster care, or they are even sometimes with very supportive help in their own family. So what happened over the years, those that run an institution get more and more kids that had more severe issues, and especially some mental health issues, you know, of their own, maybe possibly independent of their family, you know, because normally the old thing for many social workers in the old days, they blamed the family and, you know, said, oh, you will never get your kid back or something. But we have changed that, you know, we want to work with families, even though they are tough situations. But most children that I ever met, they want a family, you know. They don't want a social worker. I mean, I'm an okay person, you know, but I mean, that's not what you want to have hang around all the time, you know. You want somebody that is a family, and so we understand this, and so we are working very, very hard to deal with that. So in about 1 or 2 hours, I get to the point of trafficking with you. So just in case, because you're already looking and saying, when is he using that word trafficking the first time? Do you know? But no, I just want to set a little bit the stage, because. So we began working with Community Hospital because of most of our children today at Lutherwood have some serious psychological, psychiatric issues. Most of them, of course, because of trauma that they have experienced. So trauma is the big new word. So if you're in any way working with young people today that are troubled and troubling, the word is trauma, you know, and that's for a long time an issue we never really attended to, and we had no people that were trained in it. We just said, oh, okay, all right. right, okay, and then let's move on, kind of thing. And it's not as easy for people to move on, It's just not as easy, It's not as easy as maybe social workers and folks believed. Now, you maybe say, where were then these kids before? I mean, so you're saying, well, you had those kids and now they're... Now, I have to tell you, until some years ago, many of these most troubled and troubling kids in Indiana were placed out of state often. Or they were placed in a more robust and bigger system of psychiatric state hospitals, I mean, so that's, I think, the other part, where, since probably the 1950s, the number of psychiatric state psychiatric inpatient beds have gone down. I think there's a lot of good stuff to it, but of course you as a downtown congregation know there are some of the challenges at times, because so they are now at Lutherwood. So we needed some help, and so we came together with Community Hospital. Now I tell you another story, and then we get to, okay? Right when we finally get there, because I want you to set the stage, because you may be thinking, I will tell you in a second. 6 years ago, about 5-6 years ago, the Children's Guardian Home was closed. Is any of you have been familiar with that? That was for more than 100 years the county emergency shelter for young people. And so what is a shelter? That would be the situation when tonight police officers would find a boy or girl walking the streets or something. They cannot find anybody who is responsible for her, or any of those things. And instead of bringing them just to the juvenile center on Keystone, they would bring them to the Guardian Home. And they'd done this kind of work for a long time, but the number of kids were reducing, and then they had a different strategy, and then there were financial concerns. So the end of the day was, this place was closed. And we said, wait a minute, there is still some need for that, and so we stepped up together with the other very important agency for kids in this community is the Children's Bureau. That may be some of you, the Children's Bureau. Children's Bureau is the other important, the Children's Bureau. And so they have the kids that are 0 to 13 about for the shelter, and we have the 13 plus. So every day we get kids that are brought to us. Now, okay, now I'm getting to the story, okay? I know you're kind of in a way thinking, gosh, where is he taking us, This is just like... Anyway, so about a year and a half ago, close to 2 years ago, at the shelter, one beautiful evening, we get a call. FBI is calling. Yeah, that's normally not happening. They said, we have 3 girls that we just got through a sweep from some hotels, and we need to put them somewhere, because that's the interesting way why I talk to you about all these things, You maybe wonder. Because they are deemed at that situation most of the time as runaways. And if you're a runaway, you're not being locked up in the in the detention center for running away. So they needed a place for them. And so we said, okay, we take them. 2 of the girls, maybe 15, 16 years old, from Chicago. That's another important thing to know in our conversations this morning. So they came from Chicago. One was a local kid, was a local kid. And so one of the things that our staff in that shelter, where we have boys and girls, and, most of these kids we don't know a thing about. They just come in. All of a sudden we observed 2 of the girls from Chicago talking to other girls about this amazing life out there on the streets, and what's all going on, and how much money and wonderful things are going on there. So what they were really in a way doing, they were recruiting some other girls for this kind of pyramid scheme that in some ways is going on out there. These are girls are recruiting other girls, and then they are promised they don't have to work as much, and this and this and whatever. And we said, wait a minute, We cannot have that. We have vulnerable children that are maybe coming to the shelter for totally different reasons, and we need to make sure that we look at this. So we talked to Judge Morse, who is our juvenile court, superior court judge here, and probation and Office of Family and Children, and brought a number of people together and said, wait a minute, we maybe need a different program. Now, I want to remind you again, these kids, especially the girls that we work with, they come in as runaways. They're coming not necessarily immediately in as young people that are trafficked, you know. So we started a new program, and some of you have some information called the Impact Program. The Impact Program is a very intensive program to get to the bottom of what's actually going on in these kids' lives. Because unlike maybe the Oliver Twist stories of life out there on the streets of boys and girls in England in the 19th century, most of these girls are not excited to be at Lutheran Child and Family Services. Now, I just want to tell you that because maybe some of you would say, oh, this is a great place. There's a sweet little program, and they get some pancakes in the morning and some, you know, what do you want to eat kind of thing, you know, orange juice, whatever. They are not interested in that. And they are not telling us, oh, these are the people and whatever. Now, we have very skilled staff that can work with kids that are traumatized. And that's why I brought up this issue, then traumatized. We know that more than 90% of the kids have some trauma before. And they have very, very weak connections with home, too. There's often a lot of violence in the home. So the issue with kids that are running away, they are either running away from something or they're running towards something. You know, and so that's what we have started out. So we had to have a lot of training. We are working with a very interesting group that are very knowledgeable. They called Ascent 121. Maybe some of you might have heard them. They're here out of town, and they are the clinical supervisors for our program, training all of our clinical and staff, because this is very gingerly work. You know, and we have to figure many of these things out first, because as I said, most of these girls don't say, oh, I'm trafficked and I'm this and that and whatever. We know sometimes where they come from, you know, because FBI is now doing more work on that for a number of years. So they come from the big truck stops down there on, you're from the south side, you know, big truck stops. They come from other places, but even more complicated, many of them are, so to speak, trafficked on the internet. So it's not like the olden days that you would maybe see some kids walking there on Washington Street, kind of a popular place, you know, kind of Washington Street. No, that's not how that is happening, you know. It's through the internet, and it's you know, a lot of covert things, but our staff knows where this, they know where to look for it, you know. It's maybe, in the olden days, maybe in the beginning it was places like Craigslist or some other places, but they are more sophisticated places where people look for this. And they find out some of the girls. They say, oh, we don't have anything to do with that, and there they are on the internet, advertised by somebody, you know. So let's talk a little bit about runaways, because is there anybody that never wanted to run away when they were young? Okay, all right, apparently not. Okay, not in this congregation. But I have to tell you something funny. I read not too long ago, about a year and a half ago, for the first time, Huckleberry Finn. The book. We had in Germany this record of Huckleberry Finn in German, you know, kind of a short version of it for kids, you know, a little. And so I knew something about this kid, but I never put this into connection with running away, you know. Now, Huck Finn, of course, you know the story. He ran in a way away from people like us, you know. He did, or not? I mean, come on. It's somewhat similar. Similar people like us that wanted to help and want to bring him bring him up right, and he didn't want to have anything to do with this. But the good thing with Huck Finn, if you remember, the good thing that happened, he always came about people that really helped him. That really, in a way, that's how he survived. I mean, they were maybe not the type of people we maybe would have wished for, but they were caring adults that somehow took care of him, and he could have been dead several times, as you know. But and that's of course a big trouble for some of the kids that we work with. I mean, millions of children run away. I think 2-point-some million children in America every year run away for whatever reason. Sometimes our boys, when they run away, in the olden days, before we were a locked facility, but in the olden days when they ran away, most of the time after an hour we found them in the cafeteria at the hospital. Part of that was that the boys never had a real plan of what to do. I mean, it's kind of joking, but it was more serious when our girls ran away. They had real plans. There were real arrangements made. There were people talked maybe at a little job site where our kids worked, and they found somebody that bought them a ticket to go to Florida or to some other places. I mean, it was really, really interesting already. But we never connected any of that with trafficking. We just said, oh, that's just these runaway things, and that's serious and whatever, but we never connected that. And that's what Judge Moore said about 2 years ago. She said, we probably never asked the right questions, And so, because you might wonder and say, why is all this conversation going on today in our community and not long time ago? Because I bet in 1883 there was probably already some of that going on, Now, of course, we know in history in this country that, of course, there was slavery. And then there was, of course, trafficking of labor for the most part. Interestingly, in America today, there's not as much, maybe basically no trafficking of labor. There may be some people that have to work in bad situations, but in general, that's not the issue. It is trafficking for sexual issues that's the main concern that we see. So we work intensively with the girls, and we work with their families. It's very, very important too. Now, that was not so easy to organize, because normally when one is a contractor with the Office of Family and Children or probation, you either get this service paid for or that service. That means you either get paid for residential, putting somebody in a bed, or you're getting paid for the service to work intensely in the community with the family, but basically never both at the same time. It's kind of a way. But we were able to overcome this. So as soon as a girl gets to Lutherwood, we at the same moment start working with the families. Now, some of the families are very surprised of what's going on. They don't really, they maybe wonder, kid is gone for 6 months or 5 months, but cannot really put this into, Now, I have to say to you too, not all of this trafficking is the professional trafficking on the internet at truck stops, hotels, and whatever, Some of it is, they are kind of more benign forms, and some of them are very, very serious. So we had a girl, for example, where the mother was addicted to heroin, and heroin has become, all of a sudden, again in our community, a major, major issue. So the guy basically used the girl to said, hey, if you're not doing this for me, then your mom, who is, doesn't get her heroin, So those kind of things too, Or a girl maybe runs away, and there's maybe some guys, and they say, oh, you can stay with us, and, and then after a couple of days, I found out, when I came 30 years ago to this country, I learned very quickly there's no free lunch. I think you know what I'm talking about. There's no free lunch. So what they say maybe, oh, you can stay over at our place, but then soon after there's the first demands made, and there's maybe the brother and the uncle and whatever. That's kind of where the trafficking or the sharing of a child maybe comes in. So we have all these different versions of it, but the more serious versions are the ones that I described, you know. And we're talking, and that's an interesting point too. All the years that I work in child welfare with kids that are abused and neglected, these kids, by and large, have sadly no value. They're throwaway kids, you know. They have no value to anybody. And every once in a while there has been a child that maybe received an SSI check, Social Security income. And I knew sometimes over the years as a social worker that maybe people were very eager to have the kid back and say, when is he ready to come back? And it was maybe about that little check over $165 a month or something that was, but with these girls, we're talking about possibly $1,000 a day. So they have a real value for the people that are involved with them. So we're talking about a lot of money. Yes? No, through prostitution, you know, through prostitution, you know, and so they all of a sudden become a real valuable commodity for people that they don't want to give up, you know, and the other thing that has happened, there have been more people moving into the trafficking business of children in our communities because it's a much safer thing than selling drugs. Yeah, no, I mean, let's just think about it. It's a much safer thing than selling drugs, and you can sell your commodity over and over again, you know. So, I mean, people have come to this to this conclusion, and so we have seen that across the country. And if you look at some of the literature out there and what the FBI and the government is publishing on that, it is definitely clear. Now, again, most of these kids come from very, very troubled situation. So we have to attend that. We have to attend the family issue. And then we have to figure out what are the next steps for them. Because the lure of the street, as you saw there with Huck Finn, you know, it was very, very strong. You know, it's very, very strong thing. So this is probably the most difficult group of kids we work with, you know. It's probably the most difficult group of. So far, we had 41 girls in the program in the year plus that we are officially doing this. It has been a pilot program, so this is the only program in the state of Indiana. There's a number of people talking about wanting to do something or helping, but it's most of the time an issue of advocacy because they don't have any kids. We're the only program in the state that actually has children that they work with, that are in. You know, today at Lutherwood, we basically utilized one of our units and reworked it. These girls cannot be in a double room, so we had to give up some rooms because, you know, you don't know what they're doing. We have to be very, very attentive that they don't have cell phones and other things. We had a situation that a girl, for some reason, on the way back from court to our facility, got a hold of a cell phone and connected with these people. This is how they see them, their friends, you know. And so the probation officer wanted to bring the girl back to our facility, and she jumped out of the car, and immediately another car was there and sped off. And so we have to deal with those type of issues too. The good news is that we have already helped quite a number of girls, because not everybody wants to go back into this thing. But some of these girls, you probably say, wait a minute, why would anybody do that, and what's going on? Have you heard about, and that's maybe a helpful concept, have you heard about the Stockholm Syndrome? That was something many, many years ago at an embassy. It was a terrorist attack, and somehow the victims were overemphasizing with the perpetrators. And we see some of that with our kids. And our staff has to have a lot of training, because social workers in some ways use the same strategies as these people that are trafficking the kids. So how that sometimes maybe works, and then I stop, but how this sometimes maybe works with some of the girls. There's maybe a girl, there's maybe all kinds of abuse, neglect, aggression going on, maybe sexual abuse too, and she runs away. Maybe runs to a mall. I have to tell you, there are people out there that can figure these kids out within a second, like in the blink of an eye. They know who is vulnerable and who is you don't need to approach, And so they might just make an investment of a 90-cent hamburger, and just see somebody there, and they are kind of not really fitting in there because they are not there in the mall for shopping and whatever, and they go over and say, hey, how you doing, and this and that, looks like you're hungry. Oh, I just bought myself a hamburger. Here, how about you eating it? So anyway. And so they kind of get to know kids, and then there's a conversation and where they're staying, and maybe I know some people, you can stay with them and whatever. So very skillful people, It's very, very, very skillful people. Not unlike social workers, very skillful people too, because we in some ways do the same thing, You can trust me. I'm not saying that to you right now, but I'm just saying to you that you can trust me is one of the major things. Social workers, probably pastors for that matter too, use that same strategy. The other interesting thing, you have to kind of be aware of it. We get paid for that too. So that's part of these things. So we have to be careful of these relationships and have to do a lot of training of our folks that they can respond to those issues, especially to this issue of kind of basically having kids that are more or less brainwashed, But we have seen some very good successes, and the wonderful thing is that we're actually doing something about it, and so it is a long haul. Now, nobody really knows how many of these kids are around and out there, It is just something that many of our churches have become very, very interested, because the whole issue of enslaving people and is a big issue from a religious standpoint. And we are trying to figure out a way too in the last year how to work spiritually with these girls. We have, for our regular kids, we have a pretty robust spiritual engagement program called SEED, and we have Pastor Kolb and then our director of Christian education, Brady, and we know how to work with regular kids that we have at Lutherwood, but with the girls we have not totally figured out that, and we are still working on that, and that's important. So, okay, one more minute, because there's one important thing if we want to fully understand this whole issue. This is now, we are dealing with the so-called supply side of the issue of human trafficking and all of this stuff out there. But there is this other side that people call the demand side. Who are these people that are buying these services? Why is this actually even an issue? And I think we as a church and we as people have to address that issue as much as this other side. The other side here over the supply side, our work is that's a highly complicated professional work, even though that we are, because you might say, what can we do about it? Now we have a mentoring program at Lutherwood, where we are bringing some specially trained mentors to work with our kids. Sometimes they are groups from churches that maybe do some activities, and it is kind of really interesting. Our kids really enjoy meeting some normal people, not just the social work types, they really enjoy it, and they know the difference. It's kind of a really, really funny. There was one of our girls from our girls unit, and we have this wonderful group of women from one of our Lutheran churches up in Fishers, and they come every month. and they think of some games, and then they have some prayer time and so on. And one of the girls said to them, "So what are you getting paid for this?" You know? And because that's what they normally think. If somebody cares about them, they're getting paid for it, you know? And of course, partly is our own fault, because we as professionals, we kind of set it up this way, you know, that the only people that can help are professionals, you know? And we, I think, have figured out that that model, in a way, is not totally working. But we have not fully figured out a way for these girls how to integrate, because of some of the issues and some of the you know, we don't really fully know yet. And it's not, you know, Lutherwood is not kind of a little petting zoo either, you know, where you go in and hit and run and meet a couple kids, and you know, we're still working on that. So the demand side of this is something that needs our prayers. Because when I go to churches or talk to big groups of folks, you never know. The devil might be right in the room, you know, when it comes to these issues, you know. And you've probably seen, I don't know all the ins and outs, but yesterday again saw some of this fellow who had a very good job with this Subway chain, you know, Subway sandwiches. And yesterday I again read in the newspaper that he was trying to get his sentence reduced or something. But again, it brought up this case that I think highlights all the issues. I'm not totally familiar with this case, but it often starts out with, you know, pornography and this and that, and the internet makes it very, very easy, and then all of a sudden that's not enough anymore, and then all of a sudden we need to see real people, and this and that and whatever. I don't want to spare you the details, but I think if you read a little bit about these cases, how this often works, is it gets, you know, like many addictions, it starts out maybe with, you know, something with maybe some Flensburger beer, and then starts up and gets worse and worse and worse, you know, for some people, not for everybody. But so I think that's a real issue for the church, to think about what can we do and how can we come alongside people that might be vulnerable to fall into that trap, you know. And the internet is of course a giant lure out there, and it's you know, it might be not for everybody. So that's something that we want to maybe later on pray for, not only for the girls but for people that are vulnerable. You know, I bet that Jared guy, I don't know him personally, but I bet he didn't have that planned out for himself, to go for 50 years to federal prison. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I don't think he had that plan right from the beginning. Yeah, I think that's where he's going, but I'm just saying, you know. But it's, you know, but that's the issue, you know. And these were kids in New York that he actually apparently traveled to, you know, and not one or two, but quite a lot. So anyway, I just stop with that, and just want your prayers on that. It's a very difficult ministry. We have had easier ministries, you know. It's not a clear-cut kind of situation, because we have this, we have these wonderful little orphans, and they are so happy to be with you. Even though I have to say, I have to give you a little joke. I read in our place, in our old records of 1800 something, that apparently even the orphans in 1800 something were not always totally happy to be at Lutherwood, because they just built that brand new orphanage on LaSalle and Washington Street, and about 2 weeks later already some kids set fire to it. You know? So, I mean, even in those days, there were probably some that rather wanted to do their own thing and not be bossed around by a pastor in those days. They didn't have any social workers, you know. And so it was never totally easy to take care of kids, but it was kind of so funny that they were you know. Anyway, I could tell you a whole more stories about this, but I leave it at that. And thank you so much for your interest. And if you have a few questions, do we still have a minute for a question? Yes, please.
Can I ask you,
Yeah.
these kids from, like you mentioned, Chicago, do you get kids that come from
Very good, very good, very good. Yeah, sometimes initially we get some kids because they maybe find them here, but most of our kids are local kids. And that's another important information. These are not some foreign kids where you could say, oh, we don't really need to deal with that issue because they may come from Mexico or El Salvador or Germany or wherever, you know. These are our local children, American children. So we are not talking about some foreign kids that are here maybe illegally, and that's how they got into this. But it is, you know, most of the time, if they are out of our jurisdiction, so to speak, of Judge Moore's, they will be sent to those counties where they came from. Yes? Yeah. Ascent 121. Ascent 121. They are a specialized counseling program that works with girls that are traumatized, that are trafficked. And they are kind of our, you know, our clinical supervisor. You know, you have to have somebody that really knows what they are talking about when it comes to that looks over our shoulders, does some of the, you know, the training, what we call in our language kind of the clinical supervision, that you're not having some people that are just going off on their own. Maybe they want to do a good job, but they might do more damage in the process, you know, and so we work with them. And they're called Ascent 121, and they are here in Indianapolis too. It's in Indianapolis, and they are faith-based too. You know, it's a faith-based approach to it. So I know yet that you have your daughters interested, and some of the information that they base their work on comes from Atlanta. And you mentioned Atlanta earlier. Do you know? Right? Exactly. Do you know? So Ascent 121. They're on the web page too, and I get you that information. All right. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah, do you know, we know that that's an issue out there, but we ourselves don't have a program like this. But we, of course, have boys that are, you know, runaways, and so that has grown up to, we're not now totally blind to it anymore. You know, before we were really, I mean, I'm in this for more than 30 years, you know, and we never really asked the right questions. We saw these kids that were running away maybe 10 times, and we say, oh yeah, I'm glad you're back, you know, end of story, you know, kind of thing. But there's probably somebody in this community that will work with that. That brings up a whole lot of other issues of morality and whatever, in addition up with boys, you know. We have boys at Lutherwood, but not under the special program with trafficking. You know, we have right now probably about 70 children at Lutherwood, to just give you an idea. You know, most of them are individual rooms. Oh yeah, we have about. This is a big facility. You know, it's a big facility. Right, and stop by when you drop by. Then we have a group home across the street from Lutherwood called Trinity House, and that's where we have 10 boys that are working on independent living skills. They don't really have families they can go back to, or what two of the boys made a really interesting choice. We have these boys, and they are going off to college, and this is a real neat success story. There are two boys, they're brothers, going off to college. One just got a letter from Ball State, and the other one got a letter last Friday from Wabash that they can go. We'll have to figure out all these things, but there are these two boys. But these two boys made the choice when they were 18 not to go back to their family, because they knew that there would be a drain on the family, and they maybe would be going back in the wrong direction, you know. And so we made arrangements that they could stay with us longer, you know, and finish their school out and so on. And so that's those boys. We call that independent living. Yes. Oh yeah, sure. I will do that in a moment. But that's another program. Then we have 4 units for boys, you know, little boys, 9, 10 years old, probably kids that would be normally in a psychiatric long-term facility. We have them, and then we have older boys. 2 to 3 units of older boys, and so it's quite a big place. There's a school on, because our kids cannot go to regular schools. Especially the girls, if we would send them to IPS, it's something we have to be aware of. But anyway, so Jerry said, I came 30 years ago. I'm from Germany, if you have not figured that out by now, with the accent. But that's how people in this church talked for the longest time, all of them. So don't be fooled. They all talked like in this church like me, probably for a long time. And I'm at Lutheran Child and Family Services for about 20 years as the executive director, and I'm a social worker by training. So you wonder maybe where do I know some of this stuff? Yeah, I'm a social worker. I went to Catholic University for Mass and social work, and then I got a Master in Marriage and Family Therapy from Butler University. So that's when I first came. I did, and love to be in this community. And we have a little boy. He's 8 years old. So I might not look like somebody who has an 8-year-old, but I have an 8-year-old. So it's a great joy to have an 8-year-old. He's a little German American, even though his German is not very good. Question? Yes. There are other institutions in the state that work with children, with the regular, the kids in residential care. There's a number of them, and many of them are actually come out of special faith traditions. I give you an example. There's a Methodist Children's Home up in Lebanon, Indiana. There's White's Institute that I think started maybe through Quakers. I'm not totally sure. White's Institute up there. Then there is Wernley's Children's Home in Richmond, Indiana. They are another home. Then I think there's Basher homes up in Goshen. I think they come out of Mennonite faith tradition. So we have a number of those places. And then of course there was a Pleasant Run Children's Home for more than 100 years that I think was probably started out as United Church of Christ, I think. Okay. Oh, Crossroads too, yeah. And then there's Father Jabol's home out in Terre Haute that I think is connected with the Catholic Church. So we are probably one of, you wouldn't be surprised to say, oh yeah, we are one of the very respected places here in the community. But we always need your help. We always need your prayers. And if you're interested, there's some information how you can reach me. And I'd love to give you a tour at some time, even though I said it's not a petting zoo, but we get kind of, because sometimes people want to do something, but they say, what are we going to actually do? And then we have our sharing place that the church through the supported when we did our collection for many years, and that served last year 50,000 people. It's out of the MSD, the Metropolitan School District in Lawrence Township. It's right in the education center where we have a large food pantry run by volunteers and huge amounts of food. Right now, actually, at my church, they are loading up a van for sharing place with food, and it's just a great thing. So thank you so much for having me here this morning. And Pastor?
You asked for prayers, so I thought we ought to pray right now.
Good. Let's do that.
Lord, thank you for this great ministry among us, a needy side and ugly side of our culture. We thank you for this leader and the work he does, the people who work with him and for him, and as he challenges us to take healthy views of sexuality and to teach them and to promote them among our society. We pray our church can be part of that. We pray for Lutherwood, for Crossroad, Hoyleton, the old Brooklawn in Louisville, and for all the ways that we try to serve you with children, for we know vulnerable children are so close to your heart. And we thank you for this morning, and even though brings to us some ugliness, that we may have the purity of spirit and generosity and love to be driven ahead with our eyes open. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Pastor.